Pendergast. You're listening to the premier Rockets podcast. It's H-Town Hoops, hosted by Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane.
That's right. It is the H-Town Hoops podcast. Brandon Scott, Adam Spolane, Austin Mendez is producing this thing for us, and we'll get to Austin later on in the show. But for now, Adam, we got to talk about the Rockets 16-8 start. We're recording this roughly, not exactly 24 hours, but just the night before they play in the quarterfinal game, in the NBA Cup quarterfinal game against the Golden State Warriors. But as we sit right now, they're 16-8. They're the 3 seed in the Western Conference, and they're overall playing some pretty good ball, coming off of a win against the Clippers that haven't been after back-to-back losses. So really responding to a consecutive losing streak in a pretty decent way. We understand the Rockets and the Clippers were both shorthanded in that game. But my question to you to start the show is whether you think the Rockets are as good as this 16-8 start suggests. They're kind of a darling of the league right now, a cute story, one of the better stories in the NBA. Of course, they were kind of like that way last year with their turnaround, but even more so now. I mean, they lead the league in rebounding. They're third in points allowed, and only the Thunder allow a lower opponent field goal percentage. So they're playing really good basketball. To you, from what you can tell, as someone who follows it as closely as you do you feel like they are as good as their 16-8 start?
Probably not. And it's not to say that they're bad or they're overrated or anything like that. A 16-8 start is a 55-win pace, and I don't necessarily think that this is a 55-win team. I think that this is a good team. I think it's a playoff team. I just don't know if right now they are a 55-win team. I think they've been helped by the schedule hasn't been that tough, especially when you compare it to what it's normally like in the West. They've been really fortunate from just a health perspective. I mean, to get through the first 24 games and to only have to use 2 starting lineups, I think that's huge. And they've been able to use their best starting lineup 22 times so far this season. They've only had 3 games where they have missed one of their top 7 players. So, I mean, that's probably not going to hold up the rest of the season. So that's why I think that the 16-8 is probably a little inflated. There are some things that you should be really happy about, and there are some things within that 16-8 that are sustainable. I think the defense being number one. But then you also look, and there are some things that they really need to work on in the offense. I'm not sure where they're at in offensive rating. They were at one point a top 10 offensive rating team, I think. They're not quite that good offensively. They still are not efficient in the areas where you need to be efficient. They're not efficient yet at the rim. They're not efficient from behind the 3-point line. Those are areas where they really have to improve. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they are much worse than the record would indicate, but I don't think that they are quite as good as 16-8 would say.
Yeah, so you mentioned the finishing not being as good as you would like for them as Rockets fans, I'm sure would like for them to be at the rim. I know Alperen Sengun, it's been a curious case with Alperen Sengun, clearly their best player, but also not quite as good of a finisher this year, I feel like. And I'm not looking at the numbers right now. This is just from watching the games, but doesn't seem like he's been quite the finisher that he had been at least last year and in years prior. But so what do you feel like is missing? How do they get from here to there? Is this the type of thing, Adam, you feel like is an internal improvement, like Alperen Sengun just becomes better finishing around the rim? Maybe you get some more consistency from Jalen Green, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Like where does it come? Does it come from within, or is it the type of thing where the Rockets have to make a move somewhere to kind of help this offense become more, do things that are more sustainable?
Well, so I think with Sengun, and I'm going to look it up really quick right now, the fact that he is shooting what he is shooting from the restricted area does not make any sense, just because he was very good from the restricted area last year and has been very good from the restricted area in the past. And I don't know how healthy he is. I had somebody tell me within the organization that he's been dealing with some lower back soreness, and he's been getting treatment. He's been getting acupuncture treatment. on that over the course of the year. Now, this was a few weeks ago when I was told this. And again, this has not popped up on the injury report at any point during the course of the season. Going back to that first game where they played the Warriors, I asked Ime Udoka if Şengün was hurt or dealing with anything, and he said no. I said, is he 100% healthy? The answer was yes. But 57 points, so he's actually gone up. He's at 57.5% shooting from the restricted area so far this season. But last year, that number was 66.4. So, I mean, there was a time when the season started where he was in the low 40s. So he's brought that up a little bit, but it's still not where you would like it to be. But I think that he seems to be getting stronger, though, I guess would be the best way to put it. So I think that'll ultimately clean itself up. The 3-point shooting, though, we have to wait and see. This was not a good 3-point shooting team last year. It has been a wildly inconsistent 3-point shooting team this year. And that's going to be the case sometimes when you're shooting a lot of threes. Or either you're going to have those games where you make 18 and you're going to have those games where you make 8. So far this season, they are having far too many games where they make 8. They're having far too many games where they're shooting less than 30% from behind the 3-point arc. So that's something that just has to get better. I don't know if they're like, we could sit here and say, oh yeah, they need to go and they need to get a shooter, but how much does that really impact things, moving forward? Is that a this year move? Is that a move for the future? I think if you're them, you would rather just see internal improvement from the group that you have. I think that is probably ultimately what they're looking at. So it's going to be the guys like Jalen Green shooting the ball more consistently from 3. Same thing with Jabari Smith Jr. Same thing with Dylan Brooks. Same thing with Fred VanVleet. Can Thompson grow into that type of a player? So I think it's just more internal improvement than anything else. Is what you're hoping for.
The thing I would say I like the most about them, though, is how they're able to, like, they're rebounding. I think that's a big thing. They're rebounding really well. And the defense, like the stat that I rattled off a moment ago, that only the Thunder allow a lower opponent field goal percentage. And that was as of, a couple hours ago. I know there's, games going on right now. But I mean, that to me, like you mentioned earlier, that is sustainable. I guess my question is like, what's the ceiling on that? Like, you can rely on that as like a characteristic or like an actual trait of the team and hang your hat on it. But is that good enough? Like, is it? I don't think it's good enough to keep them at the 3 seed in the Western Conference. And I don't think it'd be ultimately good enough for them to say, like, win around in the playoffs if they're the 4 or 5 seed, or certainly anything lower than that going up against a much higher seed. Like to me, that's the worry. They've got this thing that is sustainable that they can rely on, but to me, it's not enough for them to actually be the team that I think that they want to be, or the team that the 16-8 record might suggest they could be. If that makes sense.
But isn't that okay? Like when you look at where they were 2 years ago and where they finished last year and where they are now, it seems like just kind of the natural progression. And it seems like they are getting better in the ways that you want to get better. Now, obviously, the consistency is probably the next step for them. And it's the kind of bringing, the right amount of energy and everything to a game night in and night out. That's something that you're wanting to see get better. But like, the way that they're playing right now is fine, and their weaknesses right now are fine. Like, I'm not sitting here on December 10th saying this is a team that has to win a championship or else it's a failure, or this team has to get to the conference finals or it's a failure. No, it's like, let it grow, see what it actually is, and then you can start making some decisions after that. So for me, are they as good as the 16-8? Probably not. Are they going to fall off at some point a little bit? Yeah, probably. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so.
So you mentioned letting it grow, right, Adam? Like, let the core develop and let this process run its course and kind of do its thing. Monitor the development, hold folks accountable. I think we both believe in that. But like, let it do its thing. Okay. So with that in mind, explain to our H-Town Hoops podcast audience why you are against the idea of trading for, say, a Jimmy Butler, or if we want, we can do it like this, Adam. Pick apart any of the juiciest Rockets trade rumors that might be out there and why they may or may not make sense.
I mean, I just don't think it is necessary to like artificially speed up the clock with this group. Like, I just don't think there is that sort of mandate right now to say, you know what, this team has a chance to get to the playoffs for the first time since 2020. We need to push this up. It can't just be playoffs. It has to be winning a championship. I just don't think that when your key pieces are as young as they are and really have not been through like the real like the jaws of an NBA season, you know, when you're good and when you're going through a playoff race and when teams are targeting you, I think that you need to see how that looks first. And so, like, to me, adding a 36-year-old Jimmy Butler, does that make them a championship team right now? Like, you look at this roster and you look at what it might take to give up just to get Jimmy Butler at 36 and a free agent at the end of the year. Does that make them a championship team? Probably not in the Western Conference. And does it even, like, how far does that even get you in the West if you were to make that type of a trade? And let's say it's Jabari Smith and you need Van Vliet to make the money work and another young guy and maybe a bunch of the Phoenix picks. Like, ultimately, how good of a team does that make you? To me, it doesn't make you that good. And here's the other thing. You have this group of young guys. They are so young. And there's a level of talent that the roster has that very few other teams have. But the other thing is that they all like each other. And they all like playing with each other. They all get along. Even the vets that they brought in, like everybody fits together just within the team. So why are you in such a hurry to just like break that up to try and change over the entire roster essentially on the fly, which is very difficult to do, and try to win a championship with a 36-year-old who is not the most reliable guy just in terms of being on the floor? And then what, you're going to win a championship 1 year? And then what happens? Well, you're going to go pay Jimmy Butler, the max or, the most that he can get in free agent. Like, that just, to me, that doesn't seem like a sustainable way to building like a long-term winner. So that's why, whether it's Butler, whether it's Durant, I would at least have a conversation about, because I do think that he raises your ceiling in a much different. Kevin Durant's probably one of the 15 best players to ever play the game. Yes. Like, okay, that we can have a conversation about. And as good as Jimmy Butler has been, he's never been able to take a team to a championship. Like, he wasn't able to take a team he got to the finals a couple times, but he was never able to get past that level. And this was when he was in his, 32 and 34, age 34 seasons. Now we're talking about 36. It's a whole new ball game from here. So to me, there's this, everybody wants to speed things up so unnecessarily. And I just don't think that helps you. And I think the best way, because I'm watching Oklahoma City play Dallas right now. And like, this is kind of the same conversation that I think people were having about the Thunder. Do you go and do you swing some huge deal and break up your young nucleus for a rental of one sort to try and win maybe an extra playoff series? And frankly, they didn't do it. They made the Gordon Hayward trade, but they didn't give up anything for that. And that didn't work. And like, maybe there's a better deal out there than Gordon Hayward, but that's like the type of move that I would be looking to make if I'm them. If I'm the Rockets, I'm looking on the outside, the periphery, somebody who can come in and steal you some minutes here, steal you some minutes there. But for the most part, I want to leave my top 7, my top 8 alone just for the rest of the season. And let's see how it plays out. Now, if it plays out to where, like, I think you learn the most about your team when you get into the playoffs. Like, that's when you are playing against a team, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight games. That's when you really see what you're good at and what you're not good at. So to me, get into the playoffs, see how teams really attack you over the course of a long series, and then make some decisions based off of that. That's what I would do if I were them.
So I'm glad you made the distinction between pursuing a Jimmy Butler versus pursuing, say, a Kevin Durant, both of which are around the, on the wrong side of 35, right? Like, to me, those are two totally different conversations. Like, everything that you just laid out, the way you illustrated that, to me, you don't blow that up. You don't sacrifice the young nucleus, the core of the experiment You don't shake that up for Jimmy Butler, who I think has shown you what the ceiling of that is when that's the best player on your team. Like, yeah, maybe you can get to the finals in the Eastern Conference with Jimmy Butler as the best player on your team, with one of the best coaches of his era. Like a lot of things working well in your favor if you're the Miami Heat and Jimmy Butler is your best player, that I don't think necessarily apply a couple of years later, like now with Jimmy Butler, say, here. So to me, to answer your question, like, what does that do for your ceiling? I don't think it does. It does not make you, to me, you don't add Jimmy Butler to this team, any iteration of this team. I don't care what it is that you give up, and make them all of a sudden a Western Conference contender. With Kevin Durant, I think that there's a different argument. And I do think that there's got to be something to at least some level of interest or fixation on Kevin Durant as a possibility, even however of a long shot and like outside chance that there actually is. But that's a different conversation that might actually be worth the while, worth speeding up the process, or sacrificing a little bit of patience, or cashing in on a little bit of faith, good faith that you had in what you were doing, to say, you know what, Kevin Durant expedites that and gives me a better chance. A 36-year-old Kevin Durant is my best player, gives me a better chance at a championship than any of these other guys as the best player at any point in their careers. I think you can make that case. Now it's projecting, because you're not letting you're not playing out the string. You're not actually letting it play out, which, that's kind of what you're suggesting, and probably the best route to go. But those to me are two totally different conversations. It's not just, to me, don't break up the nucleus, but it's almost just like, I would say, don't break it up for the sake of breaking it up, just to bring in a proven guy. Like, you have to actually weigh what is the ceiling. Like, how far does this take you? And right now, with these young guys, you're a 3 seed. You're probably not going to remain that way, but you're already on the right track. If you're going to do it, to me, it's got to be somebody that you're pretty much sure puts you in that conversation of being, on that next tier in the Western Conference.
Well, I'll put it this way. If they were 8-16, I think the conversation is very different. But they're 16-8 and appear to be moving in the right direction. And all these guys that they've invested in, both in time and resources, like, they seem to all be headed trending in the right direction. If they're 8-16 and there were some guys who were like seemingly getting worse, and maybe there was some infighting within the locker room, okay, well then maybe you're feeling a little different sort of pressure. Like, then maybe all of a sudden you're getting that call from upstairs saying, hey, we haven't been to the playoffs in 4 years. You told me this was stage 2 or whatever it's called. Why aren't we winning more games? But that's not happening right now. They are well on their way to accomplishing what they want to accomplish. I don't know if anyone on this team's goal is to win a championship this year. At least not realistically. I think their goal is, let's get into the tournament, let's get into the playoffs, and let's do some damage. Doing some damage could be taking the 3 seed to 7 games in the first round, or that could be getting to the second round. So let's kind of wait and see. I don't think there's any rush. I don't think that there is any pressure from anywhere, just based off of how the first 24 games of this season have started. Just let it happen organically. I think a lot of times when you try to speed up the clock, that's when mistakes get made. Like, that's when you start to screw things up, is when you speed up your clock when you don't need to. For the most part, they aren't playing. The one guy who is 30 years old who is getting minutes is Fred VanVleet. Dylan Brooks is late 20s. Everybody else who's playing is 22, 23, 21, 19, whatever. They're 23 is like considered old in this rotation, aside from the 2 guys that they signed last year with Brooks and VanVleet. So just let it grow. And then Adams, I think, is 30 at this point. But you know what I mean? Just let it grow. Let's see how this looks for the rest of this season. I think that you are going to learn a lot about this team if they do get into the playoffs. Now, if they don't get into the playoffs, well, then changes are going to have to be made. But if they get into the playoffs, and I think at that point you will start to figure out what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, where we need to improve, where we're fine at. So I just one of the goals of this season for The team on the floor was to get to the playoffs. The goal of this season, from the front office's standpoint, was to just see how this looks and just see what you have when you get all these guys together for a second straight year.
So much of the Rockets taking that leap is predicated on Jalen Green, and really Jalen Green, I would say, especially if we're talking about not trading and sticking with the nucleus with the young core. So much of it is predicated on Jalen Green becoming a more consistent player. And this is a discussion, this is a topic that we've been having and talking about for the entire time that he's been with the Rockets, for all 4 seasons now that he's been with the Rockets. And it's no different now, where you get Jalen Green now coming off a 31-point performance, a fairly efficient performance. And of course, he has the three at the end of that Clippers game to essentially seal the deal for the Rockets in a game where they started off turning the ball over, or were turning the ball over earlier in the game, and were able to kind of nip that in the bud in the second half and really put the Clippers away. But it had a lot to do with Jalen Green playing like the guy that I think you'd like to see. Most Rockets fans would like to see him play like more consistently. Now, of course, a lot more was asked of everyone when Fred VanVleet's not in the game. You need your guards in particular to step up in a very real way, and he did that. But that to me, like when I ask you, when you and I talk about, hey, what's this team missing? What are some of the things that the Rockets are lacking to keep you from necessarily believing in that 16-8 start, from believing that they're as good as that 16-8 start might suggest? Well, that's got to be at the forefront of it. Like a more consistent Jalen Green, even if he's not necessarily at the highest end of the talent potential, if he's somewhere below it, but is at least a more consistent player, I think that completely changes the complexion of the team. I think it goes without saying that it changes the complexion of the team, but you're not getting that, right? You get this 31-point performance from Jalen Green where he's got that critical shot at the end of the game, but it's coming off poor performances. And you feel like, okay, well, here's the good Jalen Green game. Can I expect that to reveal itself again in the next game? And of course, they've got the Warriors in this NBA Cup quarterfinal game, which we'll get to in a little bit. But the last time we saw Jalen Green against the Warriors, it wasn't as good. And really, it's more so of a Green is just kind of hot and cold, up and down sort of thing. What do you feel like is like what's the common thread of when he's good and the common thread of when he's bad? Like how can they and it's been a relevant question for 4 years now going on, but how can they get this dude on track like more consistently?
It's weird just because I think so often people, and it's not just with Jalen Green, but I think it's with all players, the first thing that you do is you look at the shooting. And all of a sudden, if you see a guy shoots 4 for 16, then all of a sudden it's just like, well, he had a bad game. And I don't necessarily think that's fair, because there is so much more to the game than just shooting the basketball. Obviously, that's a very important part of the game, is shooting. And, that's your offense at that point. But I think that, and listen, he needs to become a more consistent scorer. Like, that's a big thing for him, is figuring out a way. Like, let's not have the 9 for 14, 4 for 16, 9 for 23 game stretch. Like, let's see if we can avoid that 4 for 16. But I think far too often we are looking at that shooting and just like saying, hey, that's the number right there that tells you whether or not a guy had a good game or not. And I think far too often players get like that. Players think, well, I didn't shoot the ball well, so I must have had a bad game. And that's just not how this is. There are other things that you have to do. And I do think that Jalen has gotten more consistent with the other stuff. I think he has gotten more consistent when it comes to the defense. He's gotten more consistent when it comes to the playmaking. It's just a matter. And there was the one game, it was that Warriors game where he was aggressive. So many times we talk about how he's not aggressive enough. Well, they didn't have VanVleet Thursday against the Warriors, Green was aggressive. He was just kind of aggressive in no man's land. And it's almost like he got caught. There was that one possession at the very end of the game where he's trying to drive baseline and he just tries to make this impossible pass to the corner that just has no chance of getting there. So like he's got to just sometimes it's either he's too aggressive or he's not aggressive enough. And so I think the big thing for him is that he's just kind of got to find that middle ground to where he can be an effective player, because when he's too aggressive, he's going to make mistakes. When he's not aggressive enough, he's not forcing teams to have to guard him. He's not forcing teams to have to take account of take account of him. So I think that as he gets older, I think that he'll probably find he'll find I think that middle ground a little easier. But to me, I just would say don't necessarily just look at the shooting numbers with him. And this, I'm not saying this to you, Brandon. I'm saying this kind of to the audience, because I think sometimes the shooting can be incredibly misleading. And, you might look in Jalen only had 1 assist against the Clippers. He was a lot more effective than that as a distributor, but nobody made shots. Like, is that on Jalen's fault? Is that Jalen's fault, the fact that they didn't make the shots? Or is that on the guys who were actually shooting the ball? So it can be hard sometimes. I think the big thing for me is he out there in crunch time? Because if he's out there in crunch time, that usually means that he's playing well. Even if he's not shooting it well, it means he's playing well. And one of the games where he did not play crunch time was that Portland game that they lost on the Saturday, where he didn't shoot the ball well, and then he did not get a defensive rebound, and that's what got him yanked out of the game. That's why he wasn't playing crunch time. That's why he wasn't playing overtime. It had nothing to do with the shooting. It had to do with the fact that he wasn't doing all the other stuff. And I think that NBA players aren't going to necessarily lose their confidence in the middle of a game just because they've missed 5 shots in a row. Like, they all think that 6th shot is going in. That's a big thing that Van Vliet has talked about in kind of the message that he has given with these young guys. Like, hey, just because you've missed your first 5 shots doesn't mean you're not going to make your next 5. Just keep shooting the ball confidently. That's a big Jabari Smith talking point. So don't get necessarily worked up in the shooting numbers with him. Obviously, it would be great if he could shoot the ball with a little bit more consistency, with a lot more consistency, I guess is the best way to put it. But if he's playing well, he's going to be out there when the game counts. And there are going to be nights when he's not out there. That's just kind of the nature of this team. That's just the overall depth of this team. But if he's out there for a reason. And Udoka's not going to just put somebody out there if he doesn't deserve to be out there.
Well, I know I can speak for this podcast in saying that we've done, and this is not to toot our own horn or to pat ourselves on the back. I just want to give a proper accounting. Like, we've done I think a decent job of giving Jalen Green credit for the spots, the areas in his game that have improved over the last couple of years. Like, I think we did it last season when he was struggling. You in particular, and both of us, I think, did a good job of pointing out that his decision making was a lot better last year, and the shot just wasn't there at times, a lot of times, until sort of at the very end there. This year, I would piggyback on that and add that the defense, I feel like, has taken another step, has reached another level, and that's been clear since game 1, since the very beginning of the season. Not a gradual thing with Jalen Green, but immediately to start the year, I've noticed a different level from Jalen Green on the defensive side of the floor. In addition to it seeming like he's making better, that he's a more decisive player, and making better decisions as a more decisive player. So I give him credit for those things and trying to affect the game in other ways. I think those were also things that could sometimes get him benched last year in crunch time, when it's like, man, he's not scoring, but he's not really doing much of anything else either. Kind of to your point about, man, they're not having to guard him. But also, like, if they're not having to guard him and he's not necessarily out there guarding anybody and there's just nothing really happening out there with him, there's no use for him out there. Like, that hasn't been the case this year. Give him credit for that. But what I would say about the shooting, Adam, is that when they're taking these steps and improving, and you start looking at what is the thing that's holding them back, or what is the thing that they don't do well what's their glaring weakness as a team, and their glaring weakness as a team in some ways mirrors some of his weaknesses or some of his shortcomings. You kind of look at it and then you think about how important of a player he is just to the overall operation and the goals that they're trying to achieve, their future and all of that. You're like, hey man, this would be, and it was the same thing last year. Like, oh my God, how much better of an offensive team would it be if the guy that they drafted number 2 overall, who they thought had, scoring title potential, didn't even necessarily have to give you that, but just better overall shooting, more consistent and efficient scoring. It is hard to unsee it or to look over it, even if you're able to acknowledge that he has made some he's taken some leaps in his game, and I think both things in that case are true. But it's not just on Jalen Green though. I know that's the topic that we made here, or what we're discussing here. But you mentioned Jabari Smith Jr. I mean, and then of course you mentioned earlier. I mean, it's really all of them. Like nobody really shoots the ball well enough, if you really want to be honest about it. But he's the one that stands out the most because of what the projection was, or what the belief was in what he would be. So I think that's what it is. But again, look, it's funny because and it makes him really a confounding player or a confusing kind of player, because the Clipper game, and the Clippers are a pretty good defensive team. I understand Kawhi doesn't play and all of that, but they're a decent defensive team. And Jalen Green's out there doing his thing, and you're like, hey, it's right there. It's sitting right there. What's the other game? What's the 40? Was it the Philly game where he's got the 41?
Yeah.
It's like, man, that is right there. It doesn't have to be that every night, but could it more so look like that than it does the 4 of 16 or whatever the pitiful line that you were giving out earlier? So like, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said find that balance.
Well, here's the other thing, and we talked about this quite a bit last year, is just the ability to get to the free throw line.
Yeah.
And so last 5 games, Jalen Green is averaging 8 free throws a game. The first 19 games of the season, he did not get to the free throw line more than 7 times. So, like, the free throw shooting has not quite been there. And when he gets to the free throw line, it turns out Jalen Green's a very good free throw shooter. 13 of 14 against Philly, 4 of 6 against Oklahoma City, 5 of 5 against Sacramento, 6 of 7 against Golden State, 8 of 8 against the Clippers. So, like, just get to the free throw line. Like, that's a big part of being an efficient scorer, because guess what? The jumpers aren't always going to drop. Like, that's just how this is. If you are relying on shooting a lot of threes, it's not always going to go down. But if you can draw contact, if you can get to the free throw line, then that makes your line look a whole lot better. So, against the Warriors, he was 4 of 16. He still had 14 points. Like, you can be a whole lot worse. And then a lot of that is just because you can get to the free throw line. 9 of 20 against the Clippers is not a great line. It's okay. It's fine. It's an above average line. But 31 points on 20 shots is boosted because you took 8 free throws and you made all 8 of them. So, like, to me, 8 free throws over the last 5 games, averaging 8 free throws over the last 5 games, when you didn't even take 8 at any point the first 19 games of the season. So we can just focus on getting to the line a little bit more. Again, that changes everything for him. That's what I don't know how many times we had that conversation last year, but that was a big reason why he was struggling at times. It was because he was not getting to the line. His second year, he was really good at getting to the free throw line. He was really good at using his athleticism and using his body and drawing contact and getting cheap points that way. So, like, that's a way for him to get better. And that's, to me, is a pretty simple way for him to get better, is just like, hey, if the lane is open for you, see if you can draw some contact. You've been in the league long enough to where you should know how to be able to do that at a decent level.
I want to talk about Amen Thompson's jump shot, because he was 9 of 14 from the field against the Clippers, obviously starting in place of the injured Fred VanVleet, and he had 22 points, 9 of 14. But over his last 2 games, Adam, Amin Thompson has taken 8 threes and has made 3 of them. If I have that right. He's taken 8 threes over his last 2 games and made 3 of them.
You are correct.
Now, I don't want to get carried away here. I think you and I pride ourselves on being fairly measured and rational individuals. But dare I say, Adam Spolane, that Amin Thompson is developing a jump shot. And if so, you tell me, Adam, what the hell does this mean? And look, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here because he's not a shooter by any stretch. But the jumper looks a little bit, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me the Amin Thompson jumper doesn't look a little bit better to you.
Well, I mean, I would hope. I would hope it looks better.
I get when you're starting from zero, that anything looks better.
It is
but
the way that you want it to progress.
When he shoots the ball, I don't, and this is even different, I would say, today, as you and I talk right this moment, than even a few weeks ago, where when he shoots the ball, I don't gasp or immediately assume that, hey, it's time to get on transition defense and get ready to get the ball back because Amin Thompson just took a jump shot. I think, let's see what happens here. Let's see what this is talking about. That's how I feel now when he shoots the jumper, and I just think that if he can just get more comfortable shooting it, his actual mechanics don't seem to be terrible, and I don't know, I think that there is something there, that by the end of the season, maybe we're talking about the jump shot, not necessarily being a strength of his game, but maybe they're even defending him differently, not just automatically assuming that you can lag off the guy and that he's not going to take the shot at all. Like I mentioned, he's taken 8 threes in his last 2 games, and at least appears to be more comfortable taking jump shots.
That's the big thing, is just having the confidence to take it. And you see it far too often where guys just don't have the confidence and they're afraid to miss that shot. It's okay if you miss it. You're not going to be taken off the floor because you missed a wide open 3. In fact, you will probably get taken off the floor for not taking that shot. So that's a step in the right direction for him to be confident enough to shoot, to attempt 5 of them in one game. I will take that. I think he obviously, the confidence is improved. Just the overall look of the shot, it just looks better. And that's just from the work that he's put in. The 3-point shooting doesn't stand out as much to me. Listen, it's a big jump from 14% last year to 30% this year. But again, the volume still isn't that high. I know it's been high the last couple of games, like you said, but it's still not that high. To me, the mid-range, I think, might be the area that is kind of the bigger thing with me. Just looking at it, last year, less than 30% on mid-range jumpers. This year, 42.1. Again, it's not like 42.1 isn't a great number, but it's more than. But it shows you that there is a level that he can improve on, and he may never become a great 3-point shooter. He may never become a league average 3-point shooter, but if he can at least be passable from the mid-range, that's fine. That shot is not a bad shot to take, especially if you have the ability, and this team wants to. They want to go get offensive rebounds. So, get the shot up, make teams guard you from out there. You become a much different player. You can, if teams are guarding you from out there. I think one of the reasons why they're having more success with Fred VanVleet off the floor this year is because Amin Thompson is better with the ball in his hand. Part of that is just being, willing to take that pull-up jumper. And right now it's working for him. That's a big thing. I'd like to see him get a little bit better from the free throw line, 68.4% last year. He's right below 70% this year. That's one area that he really needs to, it's not a bad number by any stretch. 70% is not bad. But if he can get into that 75, 80% range, then again, that changes things with him as well, to where, he's looking to, he's so big and physical, he's not an easy guy to keep out of the lane. And when he's able to get into the lane, he's going to be able to draw some contact that way. So all that stuff is going to improve his efficiency as a scorer. We spend a lot of time thinking about the 3-point shot. And listen, that's an important part of it too. But you can become a more efficient scorer not by getting better in other areas of the floor. And he's getting better from three. He's getting better from the mid range. He's getting better from the free throw line. Just keep on doing that.
Yeah, and Adam, I want to be clear too. With me, I'm not as much fixated on Amen Thompson becoming a 3-point shooter, but more so what the 3-point shooting, like the increase, the volume increase, what it says about the thing that I think you and I are agreeing on and talking about here, and that's the confidence and willingness. To me, the guy, and look, he's gonna be, because of his athleticism and physicality and his size, it's going to make sense for him to play, inside out, near the rim, above the rim, mid range, and then out to the 3-point line, as opposed to the opposite. That's just kind of the nature of his game. But to me, the 3-point shooting and the willingness to take those shots is an indicator. And I think you can check the math on this by just looking to see what he is doing in the mid range and what he is doing around the basket. But to me, it's showing a level of confidence in the shooting overall. That, hey, I'm even stepping out here shooting open threes if they're just gonna leave me open to shoot them. But I'm gonna also hunt mid-range shots because I'm a more confident and more competent shooter than I was when I got in the league. So to me, it's just it's not so much about him becoming a 3-point shooter. You want to see that number increase as much as it possibly, the percentage, increase as much as you possibly can. But to me, when you're seeing the volume increase, you're seeing the confidence increase, and that should be reflected in what he does in the mid-range as well.
Well, this is something that he talked about, I want to say it was preseason, where if they're going to play off you, use that space, utilize that space, take a dribble inside, and then fire up that shot. And I do think that that's something that he worked on quite a bit. And I think you're seeing that work pay off right now. So that is one that he has been obviously a nice development for what they have been able to do early this season. This was a team that frankly died last year when Van Vliet was not on the floor. And you've seen them go 2-0 without Van Vliet this season, although one of those games was against Washington, so it doesn't totally count. But to beat a decent team, even though they didn't have Harden on the road without Van Vliet, I thought that was an important step for them, especially when you didn't have Tari Eason either. So they wanted to be less reliant on Van Vliet this season. I think we thought it would be more Reed Sheppard than anything else, but right now it's turning into more of an Amen Thompson thing.
So now that you've mentioned Reed, I feel like I just want to jump right into that. Where are we right now on Reed Sheppard's? Let's just kind of go quickly go through this Reed Sheppard rabbit hole. Where are we right now with his rookie season? I think, objectively or subjectively, it's hard to not consider it either a disappointment, underwhelming, lackluster. You assign whatever phrase or word you want to use, but I don't know if I would use a positive one. I don't think you have to be overly negative or critical about it because it's still that early on in the season and that early on in his career. And you could kind of just let this thing, like we were saying earlier, let things play out. But what are you seeing right now from Reed? I feel like he's wanting to be more aggressive now than he was earlier, but that ain't saying much. And I don't really know how to feel when he's out there. I'm not really sure where I am, to be honest with you, with Reed.
I mean, he's definitely been more aggressive. Obviously he's got a long way to go. And that's what it's supposed to be for rookies. And this is let's be honest. Obviously, the numbers just in terms of volume are going to be a lot lower than what you saw from Jalen Green and some of these other guys when they were rookies. But that's just because of opportunity. Rookies are supposed to struggle in this league. That's just how this league is, especially when you are 19, 20 years old and you're undersized and you're still trying to figure this thing out. So I think the expectations that we put on rookies, especially rookies that are picked high in the draft, are way, way too high. This league is hard. Like, this is the hardest league in the entire world, and teams are gunning for you, and teams are really smart, and teams know how to take advantage of your weaknesses. And the things that were like that came easy to you in college or in high school or wherever in the G League, they're not going to come easy to you in this league. And so, like, you could tell early on, there were times where Reed Sheppard is wide open for three, but he's not as wide open as he's used to being. And so he passes up on the shot. Like, that's something that they have tried to tell him. Just take it. Take the shot. Be confident. Take the shot. You might not, you might not be wide open by 10 feet, but listen, the windows they're a lot smaller in this league than they are in the SEC. So take it. You can see him struggling defensively. Again, teams are going to go after him on that end of the floor. And he struggled to guard guys one-on-one when he was at Tennessee, but he had little tricks. He had little tricks to force turnovers. And listen, guys have
where he pokes the ball out after he gets beat.
Yeah, that worked all the time when he was at Kentucky. That's not going to work at this level quite as often, because guys are just better ball handlers and guys are just ready for that now. So he's got to adjust. He's got to figure it out. The fact that he is taking more shots now is important, because that was like one of the big complaints that they had about him early in the year, was that he just wasn't shooting. Now he's shooting. He's just not making them as much. But I think I'm pretty confident in saying that if he continues to shoot the shots that he is shooting, those are going to start going in at a higher clip. And then I think that the way that we look at him is a little different. I like the way at times he's able to run the offense. He can run little pick and rolls. He can pull up and get his shots that way. He's still a good passer. He still sees a lot on the floor, but like, it's a process. Like, the idea that you're going to come into this league and be a finished product after 24 games, like that's never going to happen. Would you like to see him be a little bit more productive? Probably, but he's played every game. There have been some positive signs. There have been some negative signs, but obviously we're going to look at the 3-point shooting, because that's supposed to be, the skill that got him into the NBA. And over these last 6 games, 0 for 1, 0 for 2, let's see, 1 for 7, 1 for 9, 2 for 14. He's 2 for 17 his last 6 games from 3. So, like, that's not good. And that obviously needs to get better, but that doesn't mean, like, as long as he's taking the right shots, as long as he's taking the shots that you want him to take, as long as he's not passing up the shots that you want him to take, I think he'll be okay eventually. It's not going to happen overnight.
So I believe in Reed Sheppard's game. I'm a fan of it. I think that eventually he's going to be a pretty good player. But here is where, for me, some of the resentment comes for Reed Sheppard and these struggles that we're talking about. I feel like Cam Whitmore right now is a better NBA player, and that they should be handling the two players opposite of how they're handling them. Like the 11 minutes, 12, whatever minutes it is that Reed Sheppard's getting. It'd be one thing if he was doing more with handling the offense and giving you a little bit of the not having to rely on Fred VanVleet as much type of dynamic. But he doesn't really necessarily provide that. And then the shooting's not there either. And of course, we understand the potential liabilities on the defensive side, because of his size and all of that sort of thing. So to me, it's like, okay, let this guy get a little experience and his confidence up to where he's willing to take more shots, gets to see more shots go down, maybe say in the G League or something. And a guy who appears to be an NBA-ready player, but probably somebody that doesn't need to play more than 15 minutes in a game, 12 minutes in a game, and Cam Whitmore, I feel like he can provide you that spark offensively. He's not a great defensive player, but I don't think he's getting hunted in the same way necessarily that Reed Sheppard would, because of the size thing. And I just think that what Reed Sheppard is effectively supposed to be providing you right now, given his limitations and given where he's at in his development, Cam Whitmore could provide you a better version of that. Your backup ball handlers / point guards or some combination of Amen Thompson, Aaron Holiday, Jalen Green when he's able to do it, and you're sort of just piecing it together when it's not Fred VanVleet from there. And to me, the value that Cam Whitmore could possibly bring you and I'm talking about the smallest of of margins, the slimmest of margins here. I get it, and in spurts here, but that's where a little bit of the resentment comes from. It's like, hey, why don't you reverse the handling of these two players, given where it appears they are in their development? Am I crazy for that?
So let me say real quick, I was surprised that they didn't bring Whitmore up for the Clippers game. I just it was strange to me just because it felt like there were some minutes that he could have had. And the fact that they left him down there, they brought him up today, though he's got a wrist thing right now, so he might not even be available to play tomorrow against the Warriors. But I was surprised that they left him down for the two games, the first Warriors game and then the game against the Clippers. That surprised me. I thought it was a very natural spot for him to come up. Here is where I understand why they are handling the two the way that they are. The first is, obviously, the Rockets aren't asking Reed Sheppard to necessarily run the offense by himself when he's out there, but he can do that. Like, he's got that in him. Whitmore does not. You don't want Cam Whitmore running the offense just because nobody else is going to see the ball. And
if he's on the floor, to me it assumes that there's somebody else out there who is running the offense, right? Like, we can go with that as well.
Yes. That's not always going to be the case, though, just because, you can have Sheppard on the floor and not need VanVleet or Green or one of the other guards. Like, he can do it. He can do it on his own. It's not going to look great in all likelihood, but he can do it on his own. Then the other thing, what were we talking about with Sheppard? One of the things that the team has had an issue with, he's passing up too many good shots, whereas Whitmore is taking way too many bad shots, and that hurts your offense just as much. So, like, when Whitmore was playing up here, the shot selection was bad. He wasn't making shots. The defense, like, he wasn't playing well. Like, it's like he kind of played himself out of the rotation at the start of the year. Now, should they probably give him another opportunity here coming up? Yeah, but it's just hard when he can't run the offense and you've got so many other wings. Like, they're not minutes for him, which was why I was surprised that they did not bring him up to play on Sunday when it seemed like there would have been an opportunity for him. So, yeah, I get the frustration. I'm sure Whitmore is frustrated, but at the same time, there are just things that Sheppard can do that Whitmore can't do. And Whitmore, I think, has to kind of gain the trust of the staff back. I think that the way that he played the start of the year, he kind of lost some trust with guys, and I think that he's got to be able to get that back. So he'll get an opportunity here at some point, but like it was pretty glaring, like how poorly he played when he was out there, especially based off of what he did last year.
We get it. The Warriors are the boogeyman, but I want to talk to you briefly about the significance of this game, because you and I, over the last couple of years, have talked plenty about the Rockets needing to play high leverage, high stakes, I should say, types of games that matter, get that type of experience in. Here that is, like, it's a far cry from the Rockets Warriors rivalry of yesteryear, but it still has a spirit to it. And obviously this is an NBA Cup quarterfinal game. How would you describe the significance of this matchup between the Rockets and the Warriors on Wednesday night?
Well, from a national level, I do think it's a good showcase for them. It's an island game. They will be the only game on when that game tips at 8:30 on Wednesday. So, like, that's a good opportunity for them to show what type of team they are. I don't listen. We can talk about the cup and does the cup matter? Does the cup not matter? There are going to be plenty of people who will tell you how the cup has improved the quality of all these games. No, guys are competitive. Guys want to compete. I think that this game matters to them more because it's an opportunity to beat a team that they haven't beaten in 15 tries. And there are, I believe, the only Rocket who has beaten the Warriors as a Rocket is Jeff Green. Obviously, that is something that I imagine they would like to change here. And so they've got a great opportunity to do that. It's on their home floor. It's an 8:30 tip. So there's no excuses about how the crowd is, the crowd had to deal with traffic to get to the arena. That should not be any sort of an issue. It is, again, it's a really good opportunity for them. the one thing Tari Eason, who will play in this game, talked about how he doesn't like the Warriors. The Warriors have a healthy amount of respect for what the Rockets are doing, and I think Draymond Green has talked about that quite a bit, especially with Eason. I think that he specifically brought up Eason as one of those guys that he really likes and appreciates the way that he played. But at some point, you want to go and beat those guys, and so it's an opportunity for them to do that. It's been a long time coming, and I think the cup is probably secondary. I think it's them wanting to prove that they can beat that team just because they've had their chances. They've had some close games against them in the past. There was a one game in San Francisco where Curry hit the walk-off. There was a game here where Curry had just a monster. I mean, you've seen all the ways that the Rockets lose to the Warriors. It happens in a lot of different ways. There were the two games this season they had a chance to win. They went down by 30 in the first half, stormed back to get to overtime. They probably should have won that game in regulation. The game just last week, no Curry, no Green. They still couldn't win it because they scored 93 points. So, I think that this is big for them psychologically just to get that off their backs, just so they don't have to keep answering the questions about why can't you beat the Warriors. I think that matters more than the cup and going to Vegas and any of that stuff.
Yeah. So I guess that's how I'm looking at it, really, Adam, as being kind of a twofold type of benefit. Like if you can internalize the cup a little bit and say, hey, if you can just make the cup matter at all, on top of the fact that it's the Warriors, it makes it that bigger of a game. You know what I mean? Like you've got the high stakes of the cup, but then it's not just, it's not the Hornets, it's not just any old team. It's the Warriors, it's the boogeyman, it's the team, it's the monkey on your back, it's the team that you can't seem to beat, even when they're in their most pitiful state, like they were last week. Like to me, that there's just something about that can be, there's like a value in getting that monkey off the back. So that to me is the significance. It's a high leverage game because it is the cup. And look, I don't know how much they internalize it, how much it matters to them, but if they could make that damn thing matter at all, on top of the fact that it's the Warriors, I think that you got potential for some drama. And then you mentioned, the fact that obviously it's a TNT game, a national showcase, and that's the kind of the cool part about it too is, the Rockets are this kind of cool NBA story that you don't necessarily get to watch a lot of, and you haven't, if you're not here, you probably haven't been paying too close of attention to what's been going on the last few years. Here is like the kind of the fruits of the labor, so to speak, on national display. Oh, by the way, against the team that just has always been in their way, even in previous iterations of the team. This team has always been in their way. This franchise has always been in their way. So I think it's significant in a number of reasons. Of course, this game specifically, you're getting Fred VanVleet back, you're getting Tari Eason back, and those things are obviously significant for the things we talked about with the with the lineup, or with how the offense runs with and without Fred VanVleet out there, and of course Tari Eason being arguably your most energetic, your most important piece off the bench, depending on him or Amin Thompson, between the two of them, the Terror Twins as they like to call them. So that part of it is significant. Getting those two guys back and seeing what that looks like. I know Şengün. I'm not sure what the status is with Şengün. I saw he was questionable. So I guess how's that working out? I guess we'll see if he'll play.
Yeah, they say questionable. I just being at practice today, there was nothing that made me think that he wasn't going to play in this game. So maybe that'll just be a thing that we wait for tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, no, but I think it's I think it's a cool showcasing for the national basketball audience, and I think it's a cool opportunity for the Rockets themselves to kind of tap into that competitive nature against that team that they again can't seem to figure out. On top of the fact that there are stakes attached to the game. On top of that, so I'm looking forward to that, man. We've got again the Warriors Rockets hosting them in the NBA Cup quarterfinal. So we'll definitely be reacting to that at some point, either later in the week. And if we don't get together, we'll certainly do it early next week. But before we get out of here, Adam, I want to make sure that we take an opportunity to welcome the newest member of the H-Town Hoops family. All right. Our producer, Austin Mendez, and his wife did an incredible, and mostly his wife, let's just be real about it, did an incredible thing, which was bring life into this world. It is in part why we haven't been with you guys as much over the last couple of weeks, because some things are just far more important than whatever the hell the Rockets got going on. This is one of those things. My man, Austin Mendez, bringing life into the world. We want to take this opportunity, man, from the H-Town Hoops podcast community to congratulate you and your family and to do a wellness check, my man. We want to know, tell us about baby Anaya, and how's mama doing? How's papa doing? And how are you living, my man?
Man, living good, living the dream. Shoot. Baby Anaya is doing really good. Thank you, first and foremost. Thank you for this. Baby Anaya is doing really good. Got her first month checkup tomorrow. So we're going to see how big and good she is doing. But mama's doing good. Mama's a rock star. And daddy's doing good too. I think mama and daddy need some sleep. But other than that, we are doing really good. Yeah. So can't complain.
Where is she? I thought you were gonna bring her out.
Oh man, let me go get her. 1 sec. You want me to? I'll go get her.
Yeah, I think it's best with you, but you can absolutely. Yeah,
just give me a sec. Hold on now, Adam. You start something. 1 second. We'll be right back.
Yeah, do that, and I'll talk while he does that. Look, let me say this: while Austin goes get baby Anaya, I was telling him before we started the show, man, there ain't no template or advice or anything that somebody can give you on how to do that. Like, Adam, you don't have kids at all. I have 3 kids. Neither one of us is equipped to advise that man on what is in front of him, because every kid is different. Every experience is different. And even with me, man, I've got 3, and I'd be lying if I said to you I had it figured out at all.
Man,
not even a little bit. Oh, there we go.
She might start fussing because she's hungry, mama said.
There we go.
Newest H-Town Hoops podcast member, Rockets fan.
There we go. So, hey, Anaya.
Baby Anaya, she got her little
good for 10 o'clock.
Man, hey, I think, she's doing good. She's about to get fed, so she's living the dream for real. So she's gonna be watching that game tomorrow. So Rockets better show up. Come on. All right, fellas, I'll get out of here.
All right, man. Hey, that's a bet, man. You got to train them young, and love to see that. Congratulations again to Austin. I'll say this too. And I'll kick my soapbox. He talked about mama being a real rock star, and they're figuring out. Look, man, you learn a lot about your own limitations, like that you are capable. I should put it this way: your capabilities. You are capable of way more than you actually realize. Because you bring a baby into the world and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And somehow, day to day, you just figure that out. And you look up and the baby's however old, and you're like, damn, how do we do that? So Austin's going to learn a lot about his own capabilities, his wife's capabilities, and certainly baby Anaya's capabilities. So we are very, very appreciative for a healthy birth. And congratulations to our man, Austin Mendez, and his beautiful family, man. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
All right, man. So that is this edition of the H-Town Hoops podcast. Make sure that you subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. And until next time, y'all be good.